You know the name, you know the bald head, the genius intellect. But Superman's greatest enemy didn't start out as the iconic supervillain we know today. In fact, early versions of him weren't even bald. Over the decades, Lex has transformed from a mad scientist to a manipulative CEO, see even briefly, the President of the United States. Lex Luthor isn't just Superman's enemy, he's a mirror to whatever society fears most at a given moment. And every decade he gets updated, not just with a new origin or costume, but with a new message. He evolves to stay relevant, which makes him one of the most fascinating, flexible villains in all of comics history. So let's take an exploration into the wild evolution of Lex Luthor, how he started, what he represents, and why he just might be the most culturally significant villain in all of comics. Lex Luthor first appeared in 1940 in Action Comics 23, created by Superman's original creators, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. In his earliest stories, Lex wasn't bald, he had a full head of red hair, and was portrayed as a generic mad scientist. His tools were death rays, floating cities, and bizarre science fiction devices. You know, the typical mad scientist stuff. There was no tragic backstory, no personal vendetta against Superman, just pure megalomania and the thirst for power. He represented an era's anxiety around unchecked scientific exploration. This was the dawn of the atomic age, when fears of nuclear power and man playing God were on the rise. Also, fun fact, Lex becoming bald was a complete accident. A miscommunication between the writers and artists led to a situation where he was mistakenly drawn without hair. But the fans liked it, so DC just wrote with it.
What was I thinking?
His early confrontations with Superman were all about brains versus brawn. Superman could punch through steel, but Lex had the gadgets, the schemes, and the intellect to stay one step ahead, at least for a few pages. But all of that was just the beginning. Lex Luthor had much bigger roles to play in the future of comics. As comic storytelling matured during the Bronze Age, particularly the 1970s and early 80s, so did its characters. Writers began layering more complexity into their villains, and Lex Luthor was no exception. In this era, Luthor's motivations became deeply tied to Superman himself. In some versions, Lex blamed Superman for a failed lab experiment that left him bald and disfigured, a petty but human reason for his deep hatred. He wasn't just a generic threat anymore, he had personal vendettas and psychological motivations. This is also when the iconic purple and green battlesuit was introduced. Lex wasn't just scheming from a lab anymore, he was out in the field, often in space, taking Superman on in physical combat. This turned him into a hybrid of brains and brawn, kind of like an evil Tony Stark, but without the snarky one-liners or ethical restraints. These stories often leaned heavily into science fiction, mirroring society's fascination with the space race, technological advances, and futuristic dystopias. Lex was a villain not just of the mind, but of ambition, always pushing science beyond morality. And then came a massive shift in DC continuity that changed everything. In 1986, DC Comics rebooted its entire universe after Crisis on Infinite Earths, and Superman got a full makeover courtesy of writer and artist John Byrne. With that came a whole new version of Lex Luthor, one that reflected the fears of a very different world. This Lex wasn't a wild-haired mad scientist anymore. He was a clean-cut, cold-blooded, and extremely wealthy individual. He owned Metropolis through LexCorp, and he didn't need lasers or robots to ruin Superman. All he needed were lawyers, lobbyists, and the media. Lex became the archetype of the corrupt corporate mogul, a symbol of Reagan-era excess and capitalism gone rotten. He wore $1,000 suits, manipulated stock markets, and crashed opponents not with fists, but with the non-disclosure agreements and campaign donations. This was a brilliant shift. By placing Lex inside the system instead of outside of it, writers made him untouchable. Superman could punch a planet in half, but he couldn't expose Lex without evidence, and Lex made sure that evidence never existed. It was this version of Lex that helped solidify him as Superman's true opposite. Superman fights for truth and justice. Lex hides behind power and perception. In the early 2000s, DC Comics took Lex Luthor's arc to its most terrifying and brilliant conclusion. They made him President of the United States. In the storyline Lex 2000, Lex runs for office and wins. It wasn't just a plot twist, it was the natural evolution of everything he had become. A man who manipulates the system so thoroughly that he becomes the system. As president, Lex could direct federal resources against Superman, classify alien heroes as threats to national security, and reshape the public narrative. Superman was not battling just a villain, but the very power structure of America. These stories were politically charged, reflecting the post 9/11 anxieties about government power, surveillance, and misinformation. Lex didn't need kryptonite, he had executive privilege. Eventually, he was removed from office after being exposed for corruption and illegal dealings with villains like Darkseid. But the message was clear. Lex Luthor didn't need to wear armor to be dangerous. All he needed was a podium and a smile. Today, Lex Luthor appears in multiple forms across media. In the DC animated universe, Clancy Brown voiced the character with the menacing cool that defined him for a generation. Animated Lex was charming, ruthless, and always 10 steps ahead. In Zack Snyder's DCEU, Jesse Eisenberg played a younger, more chaotic version, a social network era tech mogul who embodied Silicon Valley's unsettling blend of brilliance and ego. It was a divisive take, to say the least, but one that fit the moment, a time when tech billionaires began reshaping society in real life. And now, Nicholas Hoult steps into the role for James Gunn's upcoming movie. Will this be the calculating mastermind from the comics, a new tech-savvy spin, or something entirely different? What makes Lex so enduring is that he evolves with the times. He's always relevant. In every era, he morphs into the form that best reflects our collective anxieties. Scientists, CEOs, politicians, tech overlords. We fear them all, and Lex has been them all. He doesn't need superpowers. His greatest power is his ability to control the narrative, to bend truth to his will, and to corrupt even the most noblest of ideals. So as Lex Luthor makes his way back to the cultural spotlight, let's remember what makes him so dangerous. It's not the gadgets or the schemes. It's the fact that he represents us at our worst. He's the villain who works within the rules to break the rules. The one who tells you he's saving the world while quietly taking it apart. Lex Luthor is Superman's opposite in every way, but more importantly, he's a reflection of our fears, ambition, and flaws. And that's what makes him so timeless. If you like this video and want to see more like it, hit the like button, subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one.